Now, there's no doubt that Noah, he had a different salvation that time in the Old Testament. And then Noah, his salvation was set up in a faith and works system. The reason why he was saved in a faith and works system is because he had to build an ark. Now, we're going to look at two passages concerning about Noah. Actually, we're going to look at several, but we're going to first of all look at Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. So I'm going to keep teaching about dispensational salvation, meaning a different salvation under a different dispensation. Yep. And this was definitely the case with Noah. Some people who deny dispensational truth or deny dispensational salvation, when they look at Hebrews chapter 11, they claim, no, you'll notice here that the Old Testament saints, that they were saved by faith, which is true, but their salvation by faith is different from ours. When we were saved by faith, we added no works to it. The only work that matters is what Jesus did on the cross. Yeah. Jesus did not die on the cross yet that time. So Noah's salvation, his faith had works in it. Why? Because he had to build an ark. Now, when you build an ark for your salvation, that's obviously a lot of work. If I told you to go to church for your salvation, you would accuse me of teaching works for salvation. If I told you to build a church building for your salvation, you would definitely accuse me for a lot of works. Now, if I told you to build a humongous boat that's 3 times as large as a football field, or maybe 3 times larger than that, you would accuse me of being crazy with works. Now, for you to say that Noah was only saved by faith alone, not by works, I mean, you don't know your Bible. So look at Hebrews chapter 11. They don't read about Noah's case, how he was saved. Verse 7, by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet. So that's true. There's the salvation by faith, but they didn't keep reading here. Here's his works accompanying his faith. Prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Notice he became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. So yes, he got saved by faith. Why? Because of his works on what he did. If he did not build the boat, he would not have become the heir of the righteousness which is by faith then. He would have been condemned with the world, right, at verse 7? He would have drowned out with the lost world. But he chose to be separated from the lost world by building an ark. We're going to look at Genesis 6 again, and then Luke chapter 1. I want you to compare the wording of Genesis 6 and Luke 1. Now notice that Noah, when he was saved by faith, there was definitely works accompanying it. And the wording is very clear that there was a work salvation with Noah. If you look at verse 9, Genesis 6:9, these are the generations of Noah. I've already explained that part in our last Genesis study. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. So I've explained that part in our last Genesis study. But to expound this part further, notice he's a just man, he's perfect. Why? Based on his walk with God. So notice here, this is not a justification or perfection that is similar to you Christians. That's faith alone, not by works. Noah was a different salvation. He had to go by a justification and perfection by man's righteousness, not God's righteousness. You might say, well, there's no such thing as a just and perfect person by their own righteousness. You're right, but God considers it that way. He judged them by man's righteousness, not by his righteousness. You might say, why? Because Jesus Christ did not yet die on the cross yet. So he did not die on the cross where he was able to make a legitimate, official standard of righteousness for the world. Sometimes he might give out his righteousness here and there throughout the Old Testament, but he can't just do that out of thin air. He has to put something that has credentials behind it, something that has legitimacy behind it. And that's the cross of Calvary, right? So he had to pay that with his blood. Now, if you look at Luke chapter 1 and verse 6, Luke chapter 1 and verse 6, notice that the Bible considers these people, before Jesus died on the cross, as blameless, just based on their walk with God. Luke chapter 1 verse 6. And they were both righteous before God. Look at that. Same thing like Noah. Walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord. Same thing like Noah. Notice it says blameless. How about that? So God was definitely judging them by the best of their ability at that time. We're going to also look at Ezekiel 14. Ezekiel 14. And then I want you to contrast that with Romans 10. I want you to contrast this with Romans 10. I may have shown you this passage last time, but I'm going to do it again. Romans 10 and Ezekiel 14. So there are too many verses that prove this. One is Hebrews chapter 11. It proved that, yeah, he's saved by faith, but there's works that accompanied it. People who attack yours truly viciously online and call me a heretic, they always use Hebrews 11 to prove that Noah wasn't saved by works, it was by faith alone. But they did not even read Hebrews 11. I showed you Hebrews 11. Yes, there's faith in there, but there's works that accompany it. Why do you think today's majority churches are teaching the heresy that, oh, we believe salvation by faith, but there are works that accompany it? Because it's all over the Bible. There's a salvation by faith, but there's works that accompany it. Our explanation is simple, is that that's for different people, different time period. It's not for Christians today in the church age.
Right.
But then there are people who deny this doctrine, and when you deny this doctrine, that's why you'll end up in the heresy of teaching works accompanying genuine, real faith, whatever that means.
Come on, brother.
So then all of us will be judging each other about, you're not good enough in your works. You're not genuinely saved by faith. Who are you to say that? Who are you to say that? We don't do that. We all base it on the work of Jesus Christ, and that's it. That's for today's day and age. So Hebrews 11 undoubtedly shows that. Then we see the other case with Genesis chapter 6 and verse 9. That definitely proved that. And then Luke chapter 1 showed that it was a righteousness that matched with Genesis 6:9. And then Ezekiel 14 is the bomb there. If you look at Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 14, though these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they should deliver but their own what? Souls. How do they deliver their own souls? By what?
Righteousness.
Their righteousness. You notice that? It's their own righteousness, not the righteousness of Christ. That's the salvation of their soul. Look at Romans 10. That contradicts Romans 10. You Christians aren't saved that way. You Christians are saved by Christ's righteousness, not your own righteousness. Romans chapter 10, verse 3. God condemns you today if you rely on your own righteousness. Romans 10:3. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, and going about to establish what? Their own righteousness. See? God condemns that. Why? Why is it different today compared to Noah's time? Because verse 4, you didn't read that. For Christ, see, it's based on when Jesus Christ died on the cross, is the end. Oh, meaning there was a time period. A time period of what? Of the law for righteousness. Why? The Mosaic law was their righteousness that time. And then Noah's time, because he didn't have the Mosaic law, he had to go by the law of his conscience, God's laws. So see, there was a time period of that, but Jesus Christ ended it. Okay, let's go to Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6. Now, you have to understand this, is that this teaching is not taught in the majority of Christian churches, and even independent, fundamental Baptist, King James only churches too. That's why they're very shallow in doctrine. They don't get deep into doctrine. That's why it's so important to be a Bible-believing Christian. Why? Because we're not just independent church, and we're not just Baptist in our heritage, and we're not just fundamental in our faith. We're beyond just fundamentals. We go deeper. We study doctrine. All right.